was Jessica Noir, the middle child of the family. As she stood, revealing large knives in each hand, I motioned to the agents behind me to stand their ground. She began making her way towards me. I continued to back up. One of the agents came up beside me, asking what her next course of action should be. I wanted to take her alive, avoid harming her as best as we could. Without warning, she rushed forward, not at me, but at the agent to my left. He raised his gun to shoot, but her blades quickly found a home in either side of his neck. As he fell, his gun went off. The bullet dug into the ground, kicking up a mist of dirt. I tried to grab her, but she slashed at me, tearing open my shirt. Thankfully, I was wearing a Kevlar vest underneath my clothing, so the blade missed my skin. One of the other agents took a shot, grazing her leg. She winced in pain and quickly scuttled backwards across the road. A member of our group ran up and dragged the downed agent behind the others. We waited to see what she would do next. She stood there, putting her weight almost entirely on her good leg, staring at us. She dropped her blades, fell to her knees, and let out an ear-splitting scream. Further up the road, we can hear what sounded like a large vehicle starting up. The small girl pulled out a device the size of her hand from a pocket in her dress. She clicked a button. Metal spikes, closely placed next to one another, shot out of the dirt along the side of the road. Any plan to escape in these woods was now gone. We turned to run from the gate behind us, but it had closed. One of the men ran to it, desperately trying to pull it open, but it was locked tight. We turned back to see something barreling down the road towards us, kicking up dust as it raced. It was a small school bus, painted black and red. Mounted on the front was a snowplow, and protruding from its sides were long poles placed in varying heights, nearly touching the pikes on either side of the road. Each pole was wrapped in barbed wire. As it flew towards us, we tried to shoot out the tires. All of our shots hit the dirt in the pile. Jessica smiled at us, stood up, walked into the road, closed her eyes, then lifted her head up to the sky, still smiling. She reached her arms out and spoke. The noise of the bus made it too difficult to hear, but I was able to make out what she had said by reading her lips.
I am today's sacrifice. May the foes of my family meet a fate worse than mine.
When the plow and the bus collided with Jessica Noir, she didn't even let out a scream. The top of the plow dug into the back of her head, and her body fell under the speeding modified bus. The blood-soaked vehicle was then headed our way. Lasco grabbed Lucas, and together we ran into the side of the road and dropped to the ground. The barbed wire just barely scraped our backs. I looked back to see only 2 other agents followed our lead. The others were either hit by the bus directly, or mutilated and beaten down by the bus's weaponized shafts. The bus then collided with the gate, bringing it to an immediate halt. I looked back up the path to see Jessica's flattened corpse resting in a pool of blood. Cautiously, Lasco, Lucas, and I stood up. I made my way for the bus. I threw open the doors, gun pointed at the driver, ready to unload my clip. The driver, who was the youngest sibling of the family, John, was dead, his head laying on the steering wheel.
Fuck, Monroe. Just like that. Almost all our men are gone.
Lasco yelled at me, once holding onto the chains of Lucas. I know, but there's no stopping now. It's just Mr. and Mrs. Noir left. We have to push forward.
Monroe, even if we do come out on top of all this shit, we're fucked. We got 8 of our fellow agents killed.
I know that! I screamed in Lasco's face. I lowered my gun, placed it back in its holster, and continued further up the road. You're coming or not, Lasco?
I'm coming. Come on, kid. No way in hell we're leaving you behind. Good. I want to watch my father rip your hearts out and eat them.
Lucas laughed sinisterly. As Lasco, Lucas, the 2 remaining agents, and I made our way further up the path, a large wood cabin became visible through the trees. Getting closer, we noticed someone standing out front. It was a woman, Mrs. Noir. By the looks of it, she wore a bright yellow dress with white flowers, a blossom-patterned red scarf tossed around her neck. In one hand she held a pocket watch, in the other she held a scythe. She started making her way towards us, her dress swaying side to side as she stepped closer. Pasco stopped walking, still holding on to Lucas. He pulled out his pistol and put it to Lucas's temple. The two agents behind me unholstered their weapons and aimed them at Mrs. Noir. She stopped, looked at the weapon in her hand, running her fingers over the curved top of the blade.
We've been expecting you, Agent Monroe. Lucas, thank you for bringing our guests to us. I've been working alone in the yard all day. The company is a pleasing sight.
Fuck you, you psychopath! Where's my wife? I yelled at her, keeping my gun steady, pointed at her head.
Tell us now or I'll blow your son's head off!
Pasco shouted, clearly frazzled by everything that had happened. He dug the muzzle of the gun deeper into Lucas's temple. He scrunched his face up, clearly pained by the barrel. Mrs. Noir smiled, looked each one of us in the eyes, then ducked down. Behind her, closer to the front door of the cabin, stood Mr. Noir. His hands wrapped around two large handles that were connected to a minigun, set on a tripod. What the fuck? One of the agents behind me shouted as bullets began flying through the air. I dropped onto my stomach. Lasco shoved Lucas into the line of fire. He twirled around as bullets soared through his flesh. As he fell to the ground, a mist of blood spewed from his wounds. Lasco dropped to the ground just as the stream of bullets passed over him. I turned my head into the dirt to see the last two agents of our group motionless on the ground, laying in their own blood. Lucas landed nearby, droplets of red dripping from his twisted smile. When the bullets ceased, Mr. and Mrs. Noir laughed. I looked up to the two of them hugging one another on top of the step of the porch. Lasco and I remained still on the ground as Mr. and Mrs. Noir walked over to Lucas's body. Mrs. Noir, holding the scythe on her hand, bent down and dug her index finger into one of the many bullets wounded on her son. She stood up and smeared the blood across her face, laughing all the while. I jumped to my feet and broke the silence.
What the fuck is wrong with the two of you? Do you even realize what you're doing? All your kids are dead, and now you're painting your face with this blood? None of this fits the profile. We don't expect you to understand, little man,
Mrs. Noir said with a condescending tone. Mr. Noir held his wife's chin and turned her face towards his. He then offered us an explanation of sorts.
We have seen the universe,
he began.
Many years ago, we were given a chance to see everything that has been, is, and will be. As a family, we took the universe's outstretched hand and experienced infinity together. To you, it's insanity. To us, it's pure bliss. When you've looked into the eyes of oblivion and felt its cold stare at you, you come to realize that your existence is meaningless. So why not have fun with it?
I tightened my grip on my gun, then pointed at Mrs. Noir as the two stood there, looking deeply into one another's eyes. Without hesitation, I squeezed the trigger. The bullet tore through the side of her head. As she fell to the ground, Mr. Noir didn't move an inch. He remained motionless, staring happily in front of him, where his wife once stood. A moment passed, then he turned to me.
Agent Monroe, do you think you've heard me? Like I said, life is entirely meaningless. Well, for us it was, I suppose. But you...
In the blink of an eye, Mr. Noir pulled out a pistol from a holster hidden in his coat, and then shot Lasco in the knee. He fell to the ground screaming, clutching the wound in agony. I moved over to him, but was stopped by a second shot in the dirt by my feet.
Normal people are so predictable. If someone you care about is hurt or in trouble, you jump into danger without a second thought of the matter. What does it matter if your fellow agent here gets shot, bleeds out, and dies? What does it matter if your wife was kidnapped, tortured, and murdered in a way you deem gruesome and humane?
What did you do to my wife?
I'll show you. Come with me. Your friend will be fine. Don't worry about him.
He turned and headed for the front door of the cabin. I looked at Lasco. He nodded at me, reassuring he'd be fine. I then reluctantly followed Mr. Noir past the minigun and into the house. The inside of the building was entirely empty. No furniture, pictures on the wall, wallpaper, or anything of the sort. Nothing but some wooden planks and a black marker laying in the center of the room. I followed Mr. Noir down a set of stairs near the back of the house. Candles illuminated the staircase, leading us to a big open room at the bottom. Against the wall, opposite to the base of the stairs, was a woman, strung up in chains, a bag over her head, and cuts traveling down the length of her body. Danielle? Mr. Noir made his way over to her and ripped the bag from her head. It is Danielle. Danielle! I shouted, rushing towards her. Mr. Noir quickly raised his gun to my head.
You don't get to touch her. That's the deal.
Fine. Whatever you say. Just please don't hurt her anymore.
Hurt her? It's not me who hurts her.
What?
Keith, is that you?
Yes. Yes, honey. It's me.
How could you, Keith? How could you let them take me? I'm in so much pain. You were supposed to protect me.
I know, sweetie. Tears made their way down my face.
I know.
Kneel.
Mr. Noir ordered in a firm voice. I did as he demanded. My wife looked at me, beginning to cry. I looked at her. Then, Mr. Noir shot twice. One bullet dug through my left knee, the other grazing the side of my face. I fell backwards onto the cold concrete floor. My vision became hazy for a moment. Mr. Noir stood over me, leaning down into my face.
This is how it ends, Agent Monroe. You will lose everything. Your job, your freedom, your wife.
He turned and shone at Danielle. Her body went limp as blood began seeping out of her wounds. I screamed. Mr. Noir pinned my head to the floor using the barrel of his gun.
This is the punishment I give to you, Monroe. Your wife is dead. You got all those other agents killed. You got your partner shot. Now, you must live with the burden. The guilt will boil inside of you for the rest of your life, until you inevitably blow your own fucking brains out. The worst part, I'll still be free. I'll make my way out into the world, killing more people as I go, and you'll live knowing it's your fault because you couldn't stop me.
He walked by me, kicking my gun aside as I writhed in pain, stopping at the base of the stairs to look at me one last time before making his escape.
You know, Agent Monroe, I really did like that family and kids of mine. They were my pride and joy, my favorite family to date. Now I have to go out and find a new one.
He cackled and then winked at me.
Perhaps you and I will meet again